Hari Om, and a warm welcome to all of you for joining today's satsang, the fourth in the series on Swami Venkatesananda experiences and lessons. And we're very happy that all of you are joining again. As you will of course noticed that today is not the 29th. We did not really skip April as such. It's just that due to the time zones, we had to, of course, accommodate Sri Narayan so that we can have him at a time that is suitable to him. Otherwise, if you have it in a Cape Town evening, poor Narayan would have to do it at midnight. So we did not want to put that upon him. So hence we chose a weekend close to the 29th. This may happen probably in some of the other months as well, depending on who's going to be sharing. So warm welcome. I also want to give a thank you to Beeping from Singapore for giving me some technical advice to improve on the on what we're doing. So thank you very much. So now a very, very warm welcome to Narayan Becker. He's kindly agreed to talk for this month of April, slipping into May. And we're very happy to have Narayan. Narayan has been a few times to our ashram. Whenever he has visited Cape Town, he always makes a point of coming to visit us, have satsang with us, or a cup of tea, and discussing some Children Yoga Trust things and other matters like stories of Swami Venkatesananda and so on. So we're very, very blessed to have you with us. And yes, I would like to welcome you and hand over to you so that you can share with us of your experiences and lessons with Swami Venkatesananda. Welcome. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you, Swamiji. And how absolutely marvelous to be given this privilege to talk with you all and to meet with you all in virtual space. And what a marvelous initiative this has been from Ananda Kutir in Cape Town and from Swami Vijayananda, and how beautiful these satsangs have been, starting with our own beloved Mother Yogeshwari. Hello, Mother Yogeshwari. My heart melts when I see you there with Swami Parvati. It's so wonderful to be able to connect like this after all these years that, you know, you've been such a significant figure in my life and my spiritual journey. So wonderful. Thank you. And the others there as well are looking down the list, and I see Pasquale from Vasto in Italy, and I remember visiting you, Pasquale, at your beautiful center there in that seaside town in Italy many years ago. And Shobha is there, who's now the patron of the Beacon Yoga Center, the Shivananda Ashram in Fremantle, which was my very first home in Australia. And I will always be enormously grateful and feel a warm sense of gratitude and appreciation to the Beacon Yoga Center. Veena Sharma I see is online, who of course for many years was a close confidant of Lakshmi and worked very hard with her on the Chiltern Yoga Trust. We've got the wonderful Swami Ambikananda there from the UK, and all of her work that she does with the Traditional Yoga Association in the UK, and a very, very kind and generous support of the work of the CYT, and many, many others who I haven't had the privilege to meet yet, but wonderful. And I see Aruna also online from France. And of course, Aruna sent a portfolio of the most delightful photographs. And Aruna, I'm not sure how many people have seen those, but it must have been 1981, 1982, Swamiji's last visit to France. And just the love emanating from those photographs, where he has his hand on your head, how blessed you are. And the wonderful little film that you made, sharing your experiences of him in France. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And Geraldine as well. So many people here. Wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. I don't have any wisdom to impart, but what I can and would like to do is share with you just some anecdotes and stories about my brief encounters with Swamiji and what that's meant for me during my life in the last 40 years or more. So I think going back, if you'll indulge me, going back to the very beginning was a little hall in Rosebank in Cape Town. And there, the most radiant woman I'd ever met, Mother Yogeshwari, teaching yoga classes to a fairly motley crew of students, of which I was one. In the early 1970s, we all looked a bit rugged. I was at university at the time, and someone had mentioned that there was yoga classes being offered at this hall in Rosebank. And I do recall the payment at that time, I think, was 20 cents required for the class. And even that was voluntary. And, you know, that generosity of spirit that Yogeshwari showed in sharing her knowledge has stayed with me to this day. And it's the same principle on which we run our yoga classes now, that there's a donation box, and if people want to pay, they pay. If they don't, they're still very, very welcome. It's not about the money. It's about the connection and the joy of sharing the practices and the teachings. So that was the first encounter with yoga back in the day. And then some announcement was made during one of the yoga classes that there'd be a visiting Swami, and his picture had been on the wall at the front of the hall. And so there was always this question about who is this person that Yogeshwari refers to from time to time. And there was an announcement that he was coming to visit Cape Town. I thought, we must go and have a look. But of course, it was the height of hippie days, and we were all, you know, involved in a number of other activities. But on that particular night, I remember driving with a group of friends in the back of a combi van, and coming to the hall and seeing it absolutely packed out. There wasn't a single parking space up, and I think it was Alma Road, if I remember correctly. Up and down Alma Road, there were cars everywhere. And we thought, well, we're not going to get in. And we had to park somewhere quite far away and walk, so that by the time we got to the hall, it was full, completely full, and there was no space. And one of the other people we were with said, oh, we'll go, let's turn around and go. And said, no, let's have a look, let's have a look. So we walked around the outside, and there was an open window. And along with a group of others, we peered up through the window like this, looking at this distant figure on the stage and everybody sitting in the hall. And I was immediately entranced by his presence and charisma and what emanated from him. But thought, oh, well, you know, there's no chance of any personal encounter. And at that very moment, he looked directly at me from the stage where he was sitting, into my eyes, looking through the window, and said something I'll never forget, and I won't share it with you. But what he said, only I knew. I had no idea that anybody else could know what he had said. And I was completely taken aback and startled. I thought, who is this person, and how can he see right into my mind? I've never met him before. And with that one look, my heart was captured. And the next day, I made sure that I was there well before time, a good hour before time, waiting in the wonderful little garden outside the Rosebank Hall, and was able to go into the room with the other who had gathered there and enjoy the bliss of his presence and his talk. And from that moment forward, whenever I had the opportunity, I would go and spend time with him. It was also around that time that I was fortunate enough to meet Swami Sushila. She was Sushila at the time, and Erica, she was known as Erica. I think she changed her name later to Venkatesananda. And Mother Yogeshwari used to hold wonderful little satsangs in the hall, and we'd go and attend these satsangs, and there'd be the readings from some of the books and a little talk from her and a little opportunity to just bathe in his presence like that. And Swami Sushila very kindly invited me to join her and Venkatesananda for their satsangs. They had a beautiful house, terraced house in the gardens up near the top of the walkway. And I remember going there every Saturday evening, getting the train from Newlands to the gardens, and walking up and being able to sit with them and go through the daily readings, and the chanting became more and more familiar. So happy and so grateful to Sushila for including me in that opportunity to participate in the satsangs. But it was a very difficult time in South Africa. It was the height of apartheid, and things were tense. And of course, there was military service. And any sort of school leaver or university leaver age males were subject to conscription. And I managed to postpone the conscription until after I'd finished fourth year at university, but could not avoid it any longer despite a trip to Europe to try and claim refugee status. It didn't work. So I came back expecting to be drafted into the infantry battalion in Potchefstroom, which was just a nightmare thought that I would have to carry a gun and go and fight a war on the northern border of Namibia with Angola. I was completely opposed on every level, ideologically, to the politics of the situation, but more importantly to the thought of carrying a weapon. And so during that time, and in particularly the time I spent up on the Kavango River, I took a vow not to carry any ammunition in the weapons that I was obliged to wear. So I had a pistol by my side, but when there were bullets in the magazine of the pistol, they burnt into I could feel a burning sensation. So I had them out and I had them in the drawer in the office that I was allocated, because thanks to Swamiji's grace, nothing else, the young soldiers had been traumatized through some of the experiences. And so they created a welfare division, and I'd been studying social work at university. So instead of going into a 3-month basic training course and becoming a foot soldier, I ended up doing a 3-week orientation course and immediately given rank as a member of the medical corps. And my job, believe it or not, was to send people home on compassionate leave. So I spent my army service sending people home. And I thought that was very apt. I remember we were up on the border in a little town called Rundu, and we were given leave. And on this one particular weekend, I was allowed to fly down on one of these military planes to Cape Town. And coincidentally, Swami Venkatesananda arrived in Cape Town on the very same day. And Ananda Kutir had organized a wonderful retreat at a little organic farm just outside of Cape Town in the hills called Blommetjies Kloof, as I recall. And this was a magical weekend. Probably 30 or 40 people gathered there, and somewhere there's a buried black and white photograph of this group with me sort of skulking in the background, and Swamiji sitting in the front with all these people around him. And I recall one morning, I think it was the next morning, getting up, and Sushila again, bless her, had said to me, "Why don't you consider asking for initiation?" And I thought, why? What's that? And she explained, she said, he's not going to be here much longer, and he's not accepting many more disciples, but if you ask him, perhaps he'll agree. So I said, that'd be amazing. Thank you very much. And, would you ask him for me? And she said, sure, I'll ask him. And she did and agreed and came back outside from the room where he was staying and said, Swami will see you. And I said, okay, when? And she said, now. All I had on was a tiny pair of gym shorts. That's how we walked around in those days. And I was carrying a flute walking around in the garden. And he said, now, you must go now. And I thought, okay, and went into the room. And there was Swamiji standing in all his glory like a blaze of fire. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know the protocols. I wasn't familiar with the culture. So I just stood there like a stunned mullet, like a scarecrow, wondering what to do. And he was standing with his back to me like this, with his arms folded. And I felt like, okay, I have to drop to my knees. So I dropped down to my knees. And as soon as I did that, he couldn't see me, but as soon as I did that, he turned around and opened his arms like that and looked at me. And he said, yes, what do you want? And I said, Swamiji, Sushila said that you would be prepared to give me initiation, and I'd very much like that opportunity. And he said, okay, come. And so I shuffled forward on my knees. He said, you must have been a Catholic in your last birth, because I was on my knees. And he took a mala like this, one of his malas, and he put it round my neck and repeated the mantra, the sacred mantra, a few times, and told me to repeat it back. I don't know how long that went on for, perhaps a minute or two, or no more than that. But by the end of it, he was chanting, I was chanting the mantra back, and the intonation was correct, and the sound, the pitch was correct. And then he said, okay, go. And that was all there was. But that few moments shaped my life from that point forward. That was, looking back, the most influential and significant few minutes of my life. We went back after that up to the border. On that day, by the way, that beautiful picture of him with his hands like this and his halo of hair, the one that's up in the Beacon Yoga Center in the Shivananda Ashram Perth Yoga Hall, the big one at the back, you know the one I'm talking about, Shobha, that was taken on that weekend. And I had a copy of it. Sushila posted me up a copy of that. And I remember putting kumkum on the forehead and having that on my wall in this little donga, in this little transportable building that we slept in. And every morning I would get up 4 o'clock and do rigorous meditation and asana until the call for people to present on the parade ground. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was absolutely crazy there. And there were so many times when I just avoided drama and tragedy. And I know I just had this faith. I just had this feeling that I was being guided and protected. I remember sitting in Padmasana on the ground in the dirt once, and I was in the crab pose with my head down doing some yoga on the floor, and this corporal came past, and they made some disparaging comment like, he sits there with his head up, you know what I'm saying. So there was no tolerance for any other culture or any other way of thinking, but somehow yoga became, and meditation became my primary focus, and what got me through that last 18 months in the South African military. So strangely enough, the encounters with Swamiji always seemed to coincide somehow with either leave from the army or the end of the army. And so it was with my discharge in June 1981, and he arrived in Johannesburg the day after my discharge from the army. So I remember getting in the car with another friend, his name was Mike, and we drove up from Cape Town 18 hours straight to Johannesburg, where he was staying in the house of the devotee of Swami Chidananda. And I thought her name was Yotsna, but I think Yotsna is the lady from Sydney. I don't recall her name exactly now, but she was a wonderful woman, and she hosted, you're shaking your head, Parvati, I think it's somebody else, the name of the woman who was, I can't hear you because you're muted, but you know who it is anyway. So Swamiji was there. We arrived, it was lunchtime. We'd driven non-stop all the way from Cape Town, and we'd been chanting. Mike had been teaching the mantra Om Triambakam all the way up in the car. So by the time we got there, we must have repeated it 1,008 times. And Swamiji, and they were having lunch around the table, probably 10 or 15 people. And I remember Mike walked in front of me, and it's almost as if Swamiji was invisible. And he said hello, and he was chatting away to everyone around the table. I walked in the room, and because my whole focus for the the year prior to that had just been his picture in the meditation. My eyes immediately went to him. He was sitting at the head of the table, off to one side, the head of the table, and I fell on the ground and prostrated, and my heart just melted, and I just felt I'm here where I need to be. It was the most coming home experience, the most beautiful experience to see him at that point. So he made eye contact with me, which was quite rare. That I had eye contact with him. There was one other occasion around that same table, I recall, not at that meal, but later on that visit, when I was standing there and he was talking about chopping the garlic. He was eating a lot of garlic at that time for his heart condition. And I chopped the garlic very, very, very fine for him. And then he looked at me and something happened. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience, but it's as if he bored through my eyes into my soul. And there was this feeling that nothing else existed in the universe, just this intensity of gaze. I don't know what happened. And to my everlasting regret, I looked away. I don't know if I'd been able to hold his gaze a few seconds longer, if something may, some transmission may have occurred. I don't know. But it was enough anyway to bore that into my memory. I can never forget that feeling, that sense of absolute unity that happened from that one look. He wasn't always, I look at the photos of him with some of the other people, with his arm around Shoba and his loving arms around Yogeshwari and others. He wasn't always that way with me. He was quite strict and quite abrupt and quite scolding on occasions. And I remember one time he said something about, don't try and steal from me. And I didn't know what he meant. And he said, you have to find your own path. Don't try and become me. Because what had happened was I'd come out of the army and I'd shaved my head. I thought, well, if I shave my head, then I'm a Swami. And funnily enough, I just remembered this. We went to a satsang. We used to go to all the different houses. And that one photograph you sent of brother, is it Baik, Swami Vidyananda, Naik? And we were on the way to one of his satsangs. And there was a question at someone raised their hand in the satsang, and they said, oh, if everybody's got to find their own way, why did you let him shave his head? As if there was some, it had been Swami's decision. It hadn't been. I hadn't asked him. And so I had to answer. I said, no, I just was in the army and we all had lice, so I had to shave my head. And he chuckled. He knew it wasn't true, but he chuckled because he understood that, I hadn't asked his permission and that it wasn't that I was somehow, spiritually elevated that I'd shaved my head. And we had satsang that night. And of course, we all used to get an opportunity to read the books. And that night he gave me Shivananda daily readings. And I thought, okay. And when it came the time to read Shivananda daily readings, I opened the book and it said, shave the mind, not the head. That was the opening sentence of the page. And of course, you feel like, disappearing into a shell, but you've got to carry on. So I read the rest of the passage, but I got the message loud and clear from that. There were many other occasions where the readings were just absolutely so pertinent. We'd been on a full day's round of devotees' houses, and Swami Sahajananda we'd been to his ashram, and he gifted us this beautiful orange book. I don't know where it is. It's in the archive, about Swami Shivananda. And I could see Swami was really tired. I think his heart was already starting to give him difficulty. This was 1981. And it had been a long day and a long satsang, and people had read all the books and then lots of singing. And there's one book left, and that was this one that I'd been given by Sahajananda at his instruction to go and visit. And I was desperately keen to read something from this book. And he looked at me like this after the Vashishta had been read. He said, okay, read something. And opened the book. And there was a paragraph and it said, go to every house and do satsang with every house. Sing, recite the names of the Lord and read the scriptures. Just that. and closed the book. He said, good, thank you, and finished the satsang with the chant, and we all went home and had a good sleep. So there were so many little incidents like that that kind of lifted, you know, one's perception from the ordinary everyday to something more esoteric, mystical. I don't know what it is, but not so grounded in sort of logic and rationality, but believing something, having faith in something, seeing all the connections between things and the unity between things, that he just gave these little hints from time to time to say, you know, there's more to your life and more to your experience than you can imagine. So he did say to me once, don't try and steal from me, be your own person. I wrote him a little poem, I remember. I said something like this: so if I wish to steal from you, O Master, to make this process work a little faster, then that is ego and ambition and desire burned in this Hindu ritual of fire. That's the last verse of a long poem. I didn't have to give it to him because it says he knew it already. He knew it already. And I think, again, there was a kind of example where he quoted something from it. Oh, that's right. There was another verse that said, you too, Lord, at 23, left the world to follow he who leads us out of darkness to the heavenly bliss of you. And he looked at me and he said, not 23, 24 or 22 or something. So he contradicted something that I'd written there without having read it. And all of these little clues that he gave, that there was no barrier between, you know, what he could see right into your mind, into your soul. And of course, that's quite scary because you daren't think a thought that you wouldn't want him to know. And so you'd repeat the mantra religiously and try and keep your mind on track. It was great meditation training, great concentration training. If your mind strayed to some desire or image or something that you wanted, you know, you knew he would know. There was another occasion, he used to get up very early in the morning, and our room was just, there was his room and then Sushila's room and then our room at the end of the corridor. And got up really early in the morning and went downstairs about 4 o'clock for meditation. He would join us about 5:30, summertime. And in the kitchen, there was a box of chocolates. I thought, And I thought, no harm. And I took one of those and had a chocolate, and meditation was dreadful. Mind was all over the place, scattered all over the place. And when he came down and he said, you see, no chocolate in the morning, like that. How, you know, how does he know all this stuff? But I got that lesson as well. And there were many, many others, many other slapdowns, which obviously were needed at the time. So he used to give out a lot of hints, and not always directly. Like he would allude to things. He wouldn't tell you things, me anyway, directly. There would always be a kind of a circuitous path to the point where you go, oh, I see. And there are many examples of this. For example, once when we were traveling around in Johannesburg, he took me, we'd been to many fingers rooms, ashram, and that's where he gave his last talk, by the way, in December 1982. And it's a beautiful satsang about gathering the honey from the pollen from the different plants. I think it's up on the website. But we'd been there, and he took us on one of those days to Sai Baba's ashram, Puttapati Sai Baba, not Shirdi Sai, Satya Sai. And I thought, why are you bringing me here? I've got no interest in any other guru. And who is this person and his things and all this? Really wasn't interested. And I thought, Swamiji, this isn't really, you know, how I understand things are. But it became clear later, and I'll mention it when we come to that part, why he'd taken me there specifically. But I had to go. He left, of course, South Africa on his travels. And I went back to university and finished another degree. And on the day of the completion of the graduation, Swamiji arrived in Johannesburg to the day. Now, I don't know how that works, but there he was. And so again, got in the car and drove up to Johannesburg to spend those last few precious days with him. Before going back to university, after we'd spent time, he'd done his tour and then he was leaving for Mauritius. And I thought, Swamiji, my only wish is to come to Rishikesh, throw my passport into the Ganges and live in the ashram, completely naive about what that meant and the politics of DLS and what his place there was and what he could and couldn't do. And he said, I can't give you sannyas. He said, you know, it's not for me. You can take it from Swami Shivananda, but I'm not in a position to give it to you. So I thought, it doesn't matter, Swami, as long as I'm there. So we went to Mauritius together and stayed in the Rose Hill ashram and met some beautiful people there, who some of whom are still there. Praveen, I think, Ram Gulam is there, working with the DLS branch in Rose Hill, and many, many others. And we spent some blissful days. By the way, that was the first time I'd ever taught a yoga lesson. I'd been studying from Iyengar's book, Light on Yoga, and going through the sequences at the back of the book. So I had a very clear sequence that I followed. And there was a hall full of people in the hall in the ashram in Rose Hill. And the teacher for their Hatha Yoga class, their asana class, hadn't turned up. And Swamiji said to me, he said, you go and teach. I said, I can't. I've never done it before. I don't know how to do it. He said, you'll be fine. Go. And so I thought, okay, we'll try. And I went into the room with these 20, 30 people I'd never met before and just went through the sequence that I did. And they were really appreciative and it just flowed. I just loved doing it. So in a way, that was my teacher training program, go and do the class. I didn't do 300 hours. I didn't do 500 hours. And I want to show you this beautiful little thing that I came across the other day. I don't know if the camera will show you. There's a picture of Swami here. And on the back is the teacher training certificate from, is that back to front? I don't know. It says Om. This is to certify that by the grace of God and my master Sri Swami Shivananda, 19 something or other, has received training in yoga asana and is proficient to teach students. May God bless him, Venkatesananda. So that was the 1982 teacher training program and certification. Now, of course, you've got to go through IYTA and IYA and everybody else to get your 500-hour certification, or you can go to Bali and do a 3-week course and come back a qualified yoga teacher. Things have changed, but you know, the grounding that came from Yogeshwari's classes and then the studying of Iyengar classes and then that invitation to teach, and I've taught since then with enormous joy. And whenever I'm teaching, I remember Swamiji telling me, go and take that class, and it's as if he's there somewhere in the room, or just his presence is there, or the memory of him is there and guiding the teaching. So we traveled to Mauritius with him, and I think Sushila was there, as I recall, and Swamiji was suffering. His heart was suffering, it was hot, and he didn't have enough air. We were sitting in a car, and there was a little electric fan blowing on his face, trying to give him enough air. And I said, Swamiji, I must come to India with you. I must come to India. He said, okay, come. And he took me to the Indian High Commission in Rose Hill. And he said, we'll go up and see the commissioner and we'll get you a visa, even if it's just for 7 days, to get you into the country. I was on a South African passport, which was very unpopular, of course, in those days due to apartheid. He said, we'll get you a visa. And so we went into the building and we had an appointment with a High Commissioner, Indian High Commissioner in Mauritius. Swamiji, of course, very well regarded in Mauritius and a close friend of the Prime Minister of Mauritius, so very influential politically. And he said, I have full confidence this will be the way to open the door. And as we walked into the building, there was a power failure and the lift wouldn't go up the steps, wouldn't go up to the 3rd floor. And because of his heart condition, he couldn't do the steps. So he said, sorry, we can't do it. And of course, my heart sank. And I went back to the car with him and, you know, I was broken, devastated. But that was what was meant to be. And soon after that, I said, okay, Swami, I'll go to Zimbabwe, because that's just become independent. I'll go to Zimbabwe and I'll find a job there teaching. And he said, make your plans and go to hell. That was what he said to me. I remember his words exactly, and they were very prophetic because, of course, Zimbabwe did become a kind of hell with everything that unfolded there in the years following independence. It was a very difficult place to be. But that's what I did. I was quite pig-headed at the time. So I went to Harare, and earlier, thanks to a wonderful woman in Cape Town, and I know Yogeshwari, you'll remember her, in Parvati, you'll remember Tara Ben. Do you remember Tara? Yes. So Tara, of course, was a real matriarch, and she used to boss us all around and give us little jobs to do when Swami was there. And my jobs always involved driving somewhere far away and being away from him for long periods of time, when all I wanted to do was be there right in the room with him. But she'd send me off to go and buy some ghee in a Rylands estate or somewhere far away from where he was staying. So anyway, she was a lovely woman, and she invited me to go to meet another Swami, Swami Narayan, who was a 90-year-old Swami, a direct disciple of a Swami Shivananda, who was a direct disciple of Ramakrishna. So he was that generation of Ramakrishna Swamis. And at that time, we weren't really able to travel freely between the different racial areas in Cape Town. You had to kind of cross over a boundary to go into the so-called Indian sector, or the colored sector, or the black sector, or the white sector. But Swami Narayan was giving a satsang in a house of a devotee, and I'd been given the address. And I got on my little moped and went to find this house. And I remember opening the door, and everyone was sitting around the fire, around the Havan Kund, and Swami Narayan was doing the Havan. And they all stopped and looked, who's this strange person coming into our house? He's not even an Indian, but he's and I bowed like this, and it seemed to put everyone at rest, because they turned back to the fire and continued. And I can still hear Swami Narayananda's chanting, Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaya Viche Swaha. It was the last day of Durga Puja, and that Havan was amazing, like being a Hubble telescope in the out into space. So Swami Narayananda was based in Zimbabwe, and after leaving Mauritius, I went to Harare and stayed with him in his ashram. An elderly lady had a house there, and he lived in a room when he was in Harare. And I spent some time there with him. I wrote a letter to Swami at that time, said, I'm in Zimbabwe, I'm here now. And I expected a letter to say, well, that's fine, but, get back to Cape Town. I'll see you when you get there. But instead he said, I'm super wonderful that you found the holy feet of Swami Narayananda. May God bless you. Get out of my life. That's how it felt. But that's not what he was saying, of course. The connection between, those people on that level are indisputable. My goodness, time is going. So spent a few weeks there with Swami Narayananda, and then went back to Cape Town. It was very difficult. I tried to get a job in a school up in a village called Shamva near the capital, and the teacher, the principal, who was a black Zimbabwean man, welcomed me, and the young boys welcomed me to come and teach English there. But when I got to get the permit, it was a crusty old colonial bureaucrat, and he said, we don't need your kind here. Go. So I had to leave Zimbabwe, went back to Cape Town, and did another year at university. And at the day of graduation, again, Swamiji arrived in Johannesburg at the same ashram, Swami Chidananda's ashram. And this was his last visit, of course. During that time, I'd applied for a visa to come to Australia, and I didn't know whether that would happen or not, but I was desperate to come to Australia, stay at the Beacon Yoga Centre, and all of the wonderful people that were there, Janaki and David and Shobha and Hamsa and Lakshmi and all the others, Shona and others living there at the time. I was desperate to go to Australia, get an Australian passport, and have a second try to get to Rishikesh and go and become a Swami. But that also wasn't meant to be. So after a short time in the ashram in Perth, I had to go, condition of my visa, I had to go and work in a remote area. So I went to work in a psychiatric hospital in Queensland. And once I'd finished that internship, I was able to come back. And I came back to the Beacon Yoga Center. This must have been 1984, I think. And from there, I was able to get to India. But that last few days in Johannesburg with him, again, was life-changing experiences. And to be able to sit with him with a small group, enjoying a cup of tea in the afternoon in the little ante-room from the hall. And this question, I never spoke to him directly. I never asked him a direct question, but he'd always say things and discuss things that were extremely pertinent. And the one experience that I had there, I always used to sit at the back of the hall and watch. But one day I thought, no, I'm going to go and sit near the front. There may not be many opportunities. And I mentioned this to Sushila the other day, and she was there in the room. She remembered it too. So I came to sit in the front, and the room kept getting more and more crowded. So we had to shuffle forward little bit. And Swamiji was sitting up on the stage on a chair. And I thought, okay, this is okay. I'll just keep very small. And he came in, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, he got off his chair and he sat on the floor, this far away from my face. And I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, if I open my eyes, he's going to tell me to move. So I didn't dare open my eyes. And I sat there for the whole hour that he was talking, and it felt like there was just this one kind of field of energy around us. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And of course, then he was in the teas, morning teas, he was saying how he was going to leave soon. And I was saying, no, Swami, we need you here. So that attachment to his physical form, I think, meant that I couldn't be there right up until the 2nd, which was the day Sushila was there at his bedside. And he was on his way to Cape Town. And of course, he didn't come in body to Cape Town, but he very much came in spirit. I remember the satsang there later in December. And I had an interview at the Australian consulate in Cape Town for the 1st of December, and I had to fly back. So he sent me away the day before he left his body. But those were such precious memories. I'm going to have to hurry up a little bit. So finally, with an Australian passport, after living in the ashram for a year in Perth, was able to get to India with dreams of coming back in orange finery and being a Swami in the ashram for the rest of my days. Got to Egmore Station, which was where Swami was born, and absolutely overwhelmed and horrified at India, and having to step over open drains to a restaurant on the other side of the street with a blaring din and food served into steel plates in this crowded on stone benches and stink, and back to the hotel and mosquitoes everywhere and a fan, and I'm going home, I thought. And I'll be on the next plane home. I thought, no, let me just try one thing, and went to the station and booked a train ticket to Bangalore. And got on the train to Bangalore, first class train. I thought, thank God. And sealed windows, air conditioned, and nice comfortable seats. I thought I can cope with this. And at the station before Bangalore, the train stopped. It wasn't scheduled to stop there. No one got off, no one got on. And I opened the window and looked out, or at the door, and it said Sai Baba's ashram this way. There was a letter. I thought, oh, okay. Grabbed my bag, jumped off the train, and no one else got on, no one else got off, and the train went on to Bangalore and got a taxi to Sai Baba's ashram. Long story short, after a few weeks there, he called our little Australian group into his room for an interview. And again, one of those magical experiences, these deep black eyes like infinite pools. And he looked at me and he said, Grahastra. He said, Sanyas Nai Grahastra, which means, of course, you'll know it means, you're not a sannyasin. You have to be a householder. Too many rough edges to sandpaper off for you to think you can go into the life of a renunciate. And anyway, long story, traveled around India for about 6 months, eventually ended up in Rishikesh with Swami Krishnananda. Now, on that last day, I'd always wanted to ask Swamiji for a name, but I hadn't dared. So on that last visit to Johannesburg, he looked at me like this with one of those piercing gazes, and he said, Narayan, like that. And I knew he'd given me that name. It just felt like that landed. And so I'd adopted that name, but I hadn't used it with anybody. I was still Robert with my friends and family. But when we got to Rishikesh, and there's Swami Krishnananda, and those of you who met Swami Krishnananda know that he could be pretty direct, and he enjoyed making fun of you in front of the group as a way of kind of, you know, making people comfortable. I don't know. So we'd written in advance for permission to stay. And I think Swami Muktananda was there at the time. He'd visited the ashram in Perth. And I said, Swamiji, you know, we've come to stay in the ashram. And he said, who are you? And I said, Narayan Swami. And he laughed. And he said, Narayan Swami, Swami Narayan, like that. And the whole room burst into laughter. And I just shrank to the size of an ant at the back of the room. And, you know, I didn't say another word, but the message got through, you know, who do you think you are? Anyway, so he said, no, you can't come and stay here. You can't come and stay. So we're full. You can't stay here. So we went next door to Yoga Nikitan, to Graham's Guru's ashram that he told us about. And they gave us this palatial room overlooking the Ganges with a beautiful big plate glass windows and a veranda and nice comfy cane chairs and a comfy bed. I thought, this is good. We're fine with this. We'll go to satsang at the DLS and come back and relax here. And then the next day we went back to satsang. And I think Swami Muktananda must have had a word with Swami Krishnananda, because he said, no, you can come and stay. And I said to Jivan, well, no, we're fine now. Thank you very much. He said, you have to come. So I had to pack up all my stuff from this wonderful villa and up in the back of DLS, this apartment block in the top story in this pokey little room, and the mattress full of bed bugs. And the morning I woke up, I was scratching myself silly. And I said, we have to have, you know, clean mattress here. He said, don't worry, I'll bring you a fresh mattress from the storeroom. And I said to the guy, I said, fresh mattress, fresh bed bugs. And he laughed and laughed. So there was a bit of tapas involved in my first visit ever to Rishikesh. It got better from there, I must say. And from there, we went up to Kulu and to Swami Sham's ashram. And Swami Sham was a householder, of course. And Swami Sham, I remember saying to him, how do you, you know, reconcile householder life with the life of being a Swami? And he said, there's one secret. And that secret is never allow yourself to get upset. Whatever happens, whatever someone says to you, you monitor your own responses and your own way of being, and don't blame anybody else. And that was the one piece of advice I remember from Swami Sham. And of course, then we went on to Dharamsala and met the Dalai Lama there and had some wonderful, wonderful experiences before coming back. And I met a woman traveling in India, and we got married. We had 3 children, and life went on. And then 10 years later, that whole thing fell apart. And she left and went with somebody else, and I was left with 3 young kids to bring up. And then Mata Amritananda, who we'd met in near Madras, was in Switzerland, and I was in Switzerland, and I said to her, what is this? She said, it's the nature of the world. She said, it's the nature of the world. Get used to it. And I was praying for a partner. I needed someone in my life. And at that point, apparently I know now, Mandy, who's my beautiful wife and partner and soulmate, was walking around the streets of Rishikesh asking for the same thing. Come here. And I'll introduce you. I don't know if any of you have met her, but this is Mandy. And they're all saying hello to you up there. There's Shobha and Mother Yogeshwari and Parvati and Swami. So we work together now. We do a lot of work together. And say a little bit about our work together if you want to.
Well, we have been working together for 20 years. We co-parent 5 children together, our youngest being 18, and have established a program, a centre here in Perth, Western Australia, that is focused on sharing a more traditional, a more spiritual, a more holistic approach to yoga than what is commonly taught and shared here in Perth and probably most places in the Western world. So while both Robert and myself had aspirations when we were younger for a more ascetic or monastic type existence. There are a lot of parallels in our aims when we were young and separate corners of the world. We've managed to integrate those aims and ambitions through the establishment of our centre here and the work that we're able to do together, while firmly being in the world with our family, our children, and making this very meaningful work that has flowed from our own spirituality, our own practice, our own connection to our revered and beloved teachers as well. So we're very blessed on this path.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. I had to, look, they're all saying hello.
Okay.
I want to share a screen with you just very briefly, if I may, and show you a couple of photographs. How do I do that now? Share screen. Let me, bear with me while I do this, and then I'll try and log off again.
Okay.
Thanks, Mandy. Good on you. So I think you can see my screen. So I just want to show you our yoga center. This is our yoga center here in Perth. And before we run one of our retreats, we've got capacity for about 40 people in the class. It's an octagonal building in the forest. And there's a whole nother story about how this place came to be. There's Mandy presenting in one of our sessions recently. This is, you can see she's wearing a mask. No, it's COVID, of course, but we're very fortunate here. So that's our center, and you can see on the wall at the back our two gurus. There's Swamiji, Venkatesananda, and Ananda Mayama. Ananda Mayama is Mandy's guru. And of course, our beautiful Lakshmi, you'll remember Lakshmi, that's me. I visited her recently and we shared a piece of cake and a laugh. And Lakshmi, much like Mother Yogeshwari, devoted her life to Swamiji's work. We do a number of activities here, like the Havan. This is a Havan with a kun that we got from Jaipur. I hope you can see that. And I want to say a few words very quickly also about CYT, if we've got a few minutes, only 6 minutes left. So I'm more than 60 now and past the age when Swamiji left his body, and I really thought that I would also, die at 60, but so far it hasn't happened. So this feels like, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, hang on. So this feels like gifted time. And one of the last things that we did, Mandy organized, was a walk up to Gangotri. And we took a group of about 20 students up there. I thought it would be the last trip to India. It wasn't. Since then, of course, we've been to Rishikesh and Vashishta Guha, and most recently a Kora of Mount Kailas in Tibet. But this was a beautiful visit. And when we'd finished, we'd come back down and we were at Ananda Mayama's ashram. And I was feeling very almost despondent because I hadn't felt Swami's presence, and this was a lifelong thing to go to Gangotri. And I was sitting in the dormitory upstairs and everyone else had gone down to the meditation hall across the road, and a little haiku came to mind, a prayer to Swamiji, and it went like this: here, now, near the end of changing seasons, show me one last time your grace. And I felt a peace after writing that down. And I went down and joined the others in the meditation hall. And again, it was the last day of Durga Puja. There seems to be a very significant date somehow with Swamiji. And they were doing a puja to a young Kumari, a young Indian girl. I thought it was a statue, but they were putting the garland on and doing everything like that. I was sitting there in deep meditation. I opened my eyes and she moved. And I thought the statue's come alive. But of course, it was a living girl. And once the priest had finished doing everything, she came out with her bag of prasad and stood right in front of me and took a sweet and put it in my hand. And it was as if Swamiji and Ananda Mayama had merged in that moment. And there was that beautiful darshan again, that beautiful feeling of connection. And I just wept. I just wept and wept and wept. It was a beautiful experience. So now the work is focused on CYT in the centenary year. And these satsangs, of course, are one of the beautiful initiatives that have come out of this centenary year. Richard Levy, who's in New York, has been working tirelessly to create the website. which was first initiated by Lakshmi. And we have Sushila acting in a advisory capacity at the moment with someone many of you may know, CJ Hink Sadashiva in Thailand. We're putting together the travel reports, and we want to try and share a compendium of Swamiji's travels from 3 years in Africa right up until the last travel report. So watch that space. We're working on a boxed set of collected readings with SUNY Press in New York and other publishers in India. We've got an archive here in Perth, and many of you have been generous enough to support that. Aruna has sent us some wonderful work. We've got the German translations of the books. We've got Mauritius's travel reports. We've got cupboards full of audio and video. We've got Swamiji's personal collection of books. I'm just going to very quickly show you this as well, if I may. So these are bound books that form his personal collection, and you'll see some of the familiar faces there. And Lakshmi was the custodian of all of this, and she asked for help to manage CYT, and I worked very closely with her. Maybe also why Swami called me Narayan, because Lakshmi and Narayan worked together. So there's the archive, all the photographs at the top, all the bound books of his personal collection. These in the middle cupboard are audio and video, and then there's other cupboards full of papers that I'm still trying to sort through. So there's a lot of work to do. But the most important thing, and I'll probably finish with this, is to say that the personal practice has been the most important. I'll stop sharing this. The personal practice has been the most important thing over all these years, and that is daily japa, just doing the japa. I remember Sushila telling me at his bedside that even at the end, Swamiji was repeating his mantra right at the end. No need to do that, but he was repeating his mantra. So that's been the daily practice for me, and pranayam, and a little bit of asana, but mainly the japa and the pranayam. We share what we can with others. We're starting a teacher training program, and we'll do the havans. We'll also share some of the more esoteric practices like the Laya Yoga, the pujas, the beautiful Venkatesha puja, the chanting that we do, but above all, the regular, simple daily practice of pranayama and japa has been the foundation and the lighthouse for me over the last 40 years. 59 minutes, what's the time? 3:59. I better stop there, Swami Vijayanandaji, and hand back to you. I'm sorry for rabbiting on for so long.
Thank you, Narayanji. It was really marvelous, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And it was really so special to hear all the many anecdotes. I think I saw a tear here and there. And also, thank you so much for introducing us to your lovely wife, Mandy. So I think your marriage is what you mentioned earlier on, merging of Swami Venkatesananda Mahima through the two of you. So wonderful to witness that. So Narayanji, thank you so much. And we are so fortunate that we have this continuous contact with you through our common work in serving our Guru Swami Venkatesananda Maharaj. And yes, thank you to everyone who has contributed, who's participated today and is part of today's satsang. And we're going to have the next one on the 29th of May. And I see that our next speaker, Mataji Amrita Virappa, is with us. She's also joined today. There, she's waving. So we're very happy that you're here with us today, and we're looking forward to your sharing, which will be on the 29th of May. We haven't set a time yet, but we will finalize that now in the next few days. So thank you to everyone to joining again today. We're very happy that so many of you are joining, and that it seems to be something that is of value to everyone. So thank you very much. God bless us all. Hari Om. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat.